So there's been a lot of conversation lately about, is this the end of the dynasty era in the NBA? That is one conversation. But it is also another conversation for the NBA to want the dynasty to die. This is from Kip Kame 11. Links to their video, his video will be in the description down below. Let's get straight into it.
The Warriors are likely to be without the one and only Klay Thompson next season.
This is the end of something magical in basketball.
I never imagined would be a reality, but obviously I understand the league and things change.
Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, $66 million went to Orlando. This makes absolutely no sense to me for Denver, honestly. No sense whatsoever.
No max player right now that's taking discounts. Whenever a player who is still able to get a max takes a discount, it's surprising.
All-NBA guard Jalen Brunson has agreed to a 4-year, $156.5 million contract extension, $113 million less guaranteed. Now, the move was unprecedented with how much Brunson left.
I never wanted to leave LA, right? Initially, I was not trying to leave LA. As it played out, though, the first initial deal was, I thought, kind of disrespectful.
You let this man walk out the door.
Yo, that podcast is funny, bro. In terms of the dynasty conversation, I do just want to ask y'all this, man. And don't lie to me. Do y'all miss the dynasty era? Do y'all miss the dynasty era? I think, obviously, parity and not knowing who's going to win every single year is fun. But there was also a different level of fun into knowing, like, yo, there's a clear favorite in the league, and then there's this arms race to beat said team. And also just, and maybe a big part of it is nostalgia as well. Like, a lot of people love the early 2000s when the Lakers were dominating. A lot of people love the early 2010s when Miami was dominating. And them being a dynasty is kind of but just this idea of there being like a complete, clear-cut juggernaut in the league that everyone's, you know, gunning for. The Warriors, when they were dominating, there was a lot of good basketball being played from 2015 to 2019. I understand them being like this uber force in the league didn't really start till 2017, but even 2017 to 2019, to say that there wasn't really good basketball being played from an individual and team perspective, I don't know. But let me know what y'all think, man. I feel like some of y'all miss the dynasty era.
For nothing.
The new rules that are taking place now were basically written to squeeze the ever-living heck out of the Clippers, and it's worked.
The second apron, the dynasty.
We're seeing something now in the NBA that is unprecedented. LeBron James didn't take the max contract. An all-NBA player left $100 million on the table. Good players, max players even, are now leaving for pennies on the dollar, or even for nothing. Not a draft pick, not cash considerations, not expiring contracts, NOTHING, nothing. There seems to be no rhyme or reason for this. Why would a team invest so much into their players that have given so much to their franchise to just let them walk? Well, you see, there's this little thing called the second apron. So what is it exactly? If you've been hanging around NBA free agency news this year, you've probably heard about it, but let me get y'all hip. So a few years back, I made a very ambitious video where I dissected the entire collective bargaining agreement, the document that sets the rules for all trades and contracts in the NBA. It was a lot of work for my young sophomore self, but I feel like I did a pretty good job. So I'm familiar with the ins and outs of this thing. Plus, I have some front office experience, so there's that too. A lot's changed since then, but a lot of the same principles still apply. About every 7 years, the NBA drafts up a new collective bargaining agreement, CBA for short, to deal with the NBA's ever-changing climate. The big change for last year's CBA was the addition of multiple penalties for teams that continued to ignore the restrictions placed on them in previous CBAs, also known as the second apron. And naturally, if there's a second, there must be a first, so let's explain that. So of course, you have a salary cap. That's money you can use to sign free agents freely. But the funny thing about the NBA in particular is that the cap really isn't a cap. As long as you're re-signing your own players, you can freely spend up to $30 million extra until you get to the luxury tax line. From there, it's still not a cap. It's just that now you have to pay an extra tax to the league for each dollar that you're over the luxury tax line. So,
yeah, because people have bird rights and shit, so... Like, yeah, there is a cap, but you can go over it. Once you go over it, there's penalties. And the difference now is just the penalties are outrageous. Like, outrageous, which I believe he's going to outline shortly. But yeah, that second apron is no joke, bro. I think it's a big reason as to why the Nuggets haven't been able to make the moves that they want to. It's a big reason as to why the Celtics is for sale. I think a lot of people already forgot that, but like, Bro, the Celtics are like up for sale.
So it's like a soft warning, a light slap on the wrist. If you want to pay, you gotta pay type B. Now let's take a look at the first apron, a threshold a few million above the luxury tax line. Think about it as upgrading from the ruler to the paddle. Not only do you have to pay the tax, which is at minimum 2.5 times more the amount of money you're over the apron by, and that becomes way more if it's not your first time paying the tax, but you have multiple restrictions on what you can do. 1. Your mid-level exception is cut in half, which can be a big deal for contenders. You also lose the biannual exception, so if you're looking 1 out of every 2 years to sign some critical player, you can kiss that goodbye. And most importantly, 3. You can't sign and trade players. This was introduced in the 2011 CBA, and instead of a full stop, it became more of like a necessary burden in order to win. For every single champion in the NBA since the apron was introduced, that champion was either over the apron the season they won or over it the season after. The Bubble Lakers are the sole exception to this. So even though the NBA has seen 6 different champions in the past 6 years, teams are spending so much money, they seem to be saying. It's not fair for smaller markets, which I'll call complete cap on, by the way. We're gonna talk about it later. So they implemented the second apron. Think of the second apron as an upgrade from the paddle to the thorniest branch in the bush. Yeah, it's like that. So you have all the penalties before, and now you can tack on no mid-level exception, no packaging smaller contracts for a larger one. So if you've got great young pieces you can't trade for a star, no buyouts, no accepting more salary in trades, no buying second rounders. And if you're in the second apron more than 1 time in 4 years, you get your first round draft pick 7 years in the future sent to the very bottom of the draft. And it becomes untradeable. So it doesn't matter how fun your team is in 7 years, you'll have irrefutably the worst pick in the draft. Basically,
that's actually insane. I didn't know that. That I didn't know. If you were just over it once in 7 years, you're gonna have the, bro, regardless of how bad you are, that is actually insane. What was CJ McCollum thinking? Grant Williams, what is going on? What?
The league cripples any little trick that a high-spending team might use to stay competitive. If you're in the second apron and you've paid the tax before, which of course you have because you're competitive, any new signing, which at that point is limited to minimum contracts, would be an additional $6.25 to each dollar over the second apron.
Each dollar,
a 600% tax. So for a minimum signing, you'd be spending over $12 million in taxes. Taxes. Before, teams were able to just eat the penalties of the first apron, which the NBA says, as you could tell, wasn't the point. According to a high-ranking executive that was behind the design of the second apron, by way of the ringer, the way that teams accepted the first apron was the system not really acting in a way I'd say anyone ever intended it to act. Well, I mean, then how'd you guys want it to act then? If we take the perspective of the big, scary, big market team, oh, so scary, just eating up all of the good serviceable players in the league, then sure, you have a point. That's fine. Competition is good. We want every team to have a fair chance. But that's the thing that's heating me up, man. Everyone has a chance. We've got the draft, the Supermax, definitive proof that small market teams can win in the NBA. Where did it get to the point where this had to be mitigated, huh? How, Daniel Rube, Executive Vice President of Legal Counsel in the NBA? How? We want to have the strongest...
I would even argue that, especially nowadays, like, we are seeing the appeal of big markets just not really be like that, to be honest with you. It took a while for New York to be a respectable organization in this league that people wanted to go to. And that's a very recent thing. Outside of that, when you think of big markets in the league, you're thinking of the Lakers, and the Lakers have had some trouble signing, you know, big names over these last couple of years. Specifically this offseason, there's been the whole conversation of no one wants to play in LA. I just feel like the allure of big markets isn't like what it used to be. Miami has had trouble signing people as well. I would consider Miami a pretty big market. The Mavs, they drafted Luka. They traded for Kyrie. They haven't had a crazy big free agency signing. There's so many small markets in the league thriving. The Thunder is one of them, the Timberwolves, the Pacers, you know, all of these small markets thriving in this league. So I actually agree with that.
Possible competition across the league that we can. That benefits players, it benefits teams, it benefits fans, it benefits the business. We're going to have the strongest possible competition if we don't have a few teams each year far outspending the rest. I'm sorry, but I'm gonna have to call critical cap on that, on multiple fronts. 1, the strongest possible competition benefiting players. Sure, in an ideal league with a hard cap, that would definitely be the case. There would be more teams being competitive in the league, meaning more opportunities for high-stakes, fair combat. But that is not the case. If you want to win it all in this league, somebody's gonna have to make a sacrifice, and that includes the players. If you're a middle-class player who wants to win, well, sorry buddy, you're out of luck. The most amount of money you're making is minimum. Yep, minimum contract. Seriously, just take a look at what happened this year. Brian Toprick of Liberty Ballers pointed this out. Alec Burks, Joe Ingles, DeLon Wright, and Monte Morris all took the minimum after making more than $8 million last season. And this is just year 2. And on the flip side, if there is a premium player on the market, there will be a team that will be willing to swallow the arsenic that is the second apron, if they truly believe that they give him a shot. This new stage the NBA has set, in all honesty, doesn't make sense. This system doesn't benefit a team unless you're mid or young or both. It allows you more availability to sign casualties from the second apron shredder, because your players haven't signed the contracts that they deserve yet. So hooray, I guess. Thank you NBA for making Orlando appear in free agency talks for the first time in a decade. Whoopee. But if you haven't noticed, no one went to Orlando except for KCP. They went to actual strong contenders. I'm talking Philly and Dallas. So tell me, how does this benefit teams? It just gives franchises with sorry owners the chance, the dream, to sign some players in free agency. More than helping out the little guy, this actually hurts them, because the cost of doing business, championship business, just skyrocketed. And at the same time, you're severely hampering the middle class of players who just want to win. If you want to win in the league today, tough decisions will have to be made. Ones that will hurt the little guy, one way or the other. The NBA is telling teams.
I was actually theorizing the other week that it may not necessarily easier. I think easier is the wrong word. But if the name of the game is no owner wants to go over the second tax apron or get into the second tax apron, but there's like 2 to 3 teams that are like, all right, bro, we got a really good ass team. Let's go into that second tax apron and just gun for it. Wouldn't that make dynasties easier in a way? You know what I'm saying? So like right now, the Boston Celtics are running it back with everyone. Running it back, paying everyone. When you compare that to the other championship contenders that already exist, specifically the Denver Nuggets, I'm gonna keep it a whole stack because I think, the Denver Nuggets were the biggest threat to the Boston Celtics. Them being scary to pay their players because of the second tax apron, and then you got a team like the Boston Celtics who are not scary because they have an owner that can afford these things, or whatever the case may be. Wouldn't that make it easier for dynasties to form in a way? Maybe not dynasties, because again, like was outlined in this video, if you're in the second tax apron too long, like your draft pick 7 years from now is gonna get cooked. But maybe like repeat winners, maybe, I don't know.
Seems that the buck has to stop at some point. But that's just the thing, it won't. If a roster is good enough, some ownership group will take the plunge to varying levels of success. But anyway, that's enough complaining from me. I think I've made my point clear. Because of the second apron, the Warriors let Klay go. The Clippers let PG walk. The Nuggets let KCP go. LeBron didn't take the max, and Brunson in New York are currently colluding to find a way to slide him $100 million under the table. And the Celtics owners are literally selling the team because they're about to pay too damn much. The existence of the second apron tells us the NBA didn't like what it saw in the last decade, and they're gonna start making some renovations. But now, let's beg the most important question. How does this benefit the fans? The NBA, since its inception, has been a star-driven league. It was saved not by competitive balance, but by 3 players. And not just the individual player, which of course had the most to do with it, but the teams that they played on are what created the most avid and frenetic fan bases. Why do people love the Lakers, the Cowboys, the Bulls? One word: dynasty. A league with more parity would be more beneficial for fans of individual teams, sure, but would it be best for the league's popularity? The answer, quite simply, is no. In the past 20 years,
I actually agree with this. I think what parity does is raises the floor of your product, in my opinion. But for the NBA, their floor already being so high, in terms of growing the league, if that's the objective, is growing the league. And maybe that's not their objective, right? Maybe their objective is to truly raise the floor of competition in the league, and then we'll work on trying to grow the league once we raise the floor of competition. Maybe that's what they're trying to do. But even if that's the case, I don't think expansion helps in that as well. That's another topic for another day. But in terms of growing the league, I truly do believe that dynasties help way more than they hurt. Even though every single year the NBA playoffs are more predictable than what they should be and all of these different things, I think what dynasties provide is a superstar, megastar thing that is so clear-cut and easy to promote. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like when you're making a YouTube video and you know what's gonna bang. You know what's gonna bang. What parody does is you're kind of shaky on what like a great finals matchup would be. You know? I think a lot of us was pretty optimistic about the Celtics and Mavs being a great finals matchup going into the finals this last season. But then once we actually saw it unfold, it was like, what the fuck is this? You know what I'm saying? But when there's a clear-cut Lakers-Celtics rivalry in the league, you know, Bird versus Magic, they face off in the finals. Yes, the ratings may have not been as good going into the finals, maybe. But once we get there, the big event is here. You know what I'm saying? That main card of the night is as big as it can be. And I do think that's important for growing in the league. And now this is just me thinking of things from like a YouTube mindset. But there is this question in the YouTube sphere of like, would you rather have 5 to 7 videos go up every single week that average 200K views? Or would you rather have one video every single week? Every time you upload, it's once a week, is going to be 1 million views, as opposed to having 5 to 7 videos every single week that averages 200,000 views. Now, if you do the math, right, 200,000 times 7, technically you're getting more viewership with the formula where you're uploading more compared to the formula where you're only uploading once, right? But the maximum amount of impressions, the maximum amount of audience you are reaching with those 200,000 view videos, let's just say it's you're getting 5 million impressions. With the 1 million view video, you're probably getting double that, which is big. You're uploading once a week. You're the main event. Your reach is much further than uploading consistently every single day, but the only reach that you're reaching is just your core audience. Does that make sense? Hopefully I explained that well, but yeah, in terms of growing the league, dynasties help. They just do.
Years or so, these past 5 NBA finals have been by far the most balanced, with the Miami Heat being the only returnee. They've also been the lowest rated, and by significant amounts. So one could put the blame on the rise of streaming, sure, but just last year, a LeBron-Steph conference semifinals was the most watched of its kind in almost 3 decades. There's a reason for that. And of course, it's the names. But we have to ask, how did they acquire those names in the first place? It was by making the finals year in and year out, building their legacy piece by piece, until LeBron James and Stephen Curry became 2 of the most recognizable names in America. We can make the argument all we like about Luka, Joel, Giannis, and Jokic, but at the end of the day, their names simply will not hold as much weight as a LeBron or Steph until they are a part of a dynasty, and that is a fact. There's a reason KD isn't on their level of stardom. Neither is Kawhi, let alone Harden. It's not easy for a casual fan to support someone who doesn't win big. That's also a fact. The NBA needs its stars to burn bright enough in order to keep popularity afloat. But the way they're going, it seems like they're trying to siphon their own stars' oxygen. The people at the league offices, believe you me, are not dumb. They're as sharp as razors. They know everything I just said is true. They know that and are still proceeding on for this huge reason. Daniel Rube, I'm certain he's a nice guy, but to be honest with you, he's lying. And we're gonna tackle the absolute biggest lie here. It's finally time. I've heard this time and time again. And there's never been any pushback on it. Well, now that's changing. Here we go.
The lie of the
small market team being the little guy is just not factual. It is cap. Let's break it down. The NBA has 30 teams, right? And more or less 30 owners. All of said owners, or governors, are billionaires, of course. Some are richer than others, sometimes a lot richer than others, but they're all billionaires nonetheless. This is true regardless of location. It's not like because all of a sudden you're based in Memphis, you're the poorest team. In fact, the guy who owns the Grizzlies is one of the league's richest guys, and he's not alone. In fact, in the bottom 10 of the NBA quote-unquote smallest markets, they have 4 of the top 10 richest owners. This works the other way too. Golden State and the Lakers ownership have the least amount of wealth in the NBA, despite having
let me look at that list though. Hold on. Because I think Detroit market-wise is actually a big market. I don't know.
The other way too. Golden State and the Lakers ownership have the least amount of wealth in the NBA, despite having the largest markets. And overall, by the way, these guys don't even use their own money. There are only 3 teams in the NBA last year that operated at a loss. The Bucks, with their stacked roster of course, the Nets in New York, for crying out loud, and the LA Clippers, with the top 10 richest men in America. Everyone else, small markets included, made money. It's not a small market thing. Honestly, I'm not really one to agree with Draymond Green nowadays. But if a team wants to spend money, they can. It's not like this is baseball. And that stuff about players wanting to be in nicer places. Well, let's just take a look at the past few years. We've got Ja in Memphis and in Minnesota, and they're making these places look fun. Last offseason, Dame Lillard chose Milwaukee over Miami. This offseason, CP3 went from the Bay to San Antonio.
Whoa, I don't know about all that. Whoa. I don't know if Dame, I feel like Dame still wants to be in Miami, dog. I can't even lie. I think Dame, in terms of what he wants for his career, kind of just settled on, all right, man, let me ball up in Milwaukee. This is going to be my best chance to win a championship. I don't necessarily, and even in that, I don't necessarily know if Dame chose Milwaukee.
Offseason, Dame Lillard chose Milwaukee over Miami. This offseason, CP3 went from the Bay to San Antonio, which, I mean, San Antonio's a cool city, but
Them big old women down in San Antonio.
the Lakers didn't land anyone desirable. Bro, D Rose literally didn't come home. The small market advantage is now officially overplayed. No, let me tell you this, and pay attention. Subscribe, by the way, while you're here, and like the video too. The real reason the NBA implemented the second apron was because they're done with the dynasty. I'm of the suspicion that the NBA is seeing that the utility of a star-driven league is coming to a close. The NBA is about as popular as it's ever been, especially amongst the youth. And the last thing they could want right now is a KD, Steph, and Klay Thompson too, we don't want to hurt his feelings, Warriors bashing on anyone not named LeBron James. The dynasty has done incredible things for the game. It's created legends, set monumental feats, and defined for generations what it meant to be great. But those guys are getting older. LeBron, Steph, and Kevin Durant. These are the only 3. And honestly, I feel like you could argue KD out, so 2. That could guarantee bombastic and sensational fanfare. I think the NBA knows that, and does not want that trend to continue. It seems to me that they want the product as a whole, with as many teams as possible, to be as good as possible. Good enough to where it's not a meaningless regular season, where they're subject to stars sitting out of games and losing ratings. And we as fans not watching the regular season because, well, we know who's gonna be on top. It seems to me that they want to squash and flatten assets as much as possible. So
yeah, that's what I feel like is happening. Like I said earlier, I think the NBA may not necessarily be in the game mode of trying to reach new heights. You know what I'm saying? Like they're not trying to reach a new peak. What they're seeing is a problem is their floor. And what the second apron does is allow smaller markets to have better advantages. So they're trying to raise their floor. Which, if that's their prerogative, I do think things are heading that way. But I don't necessarily know if that's what the game plan should be.
Whack-a-mole, any team that stands above the rest. The argument that the league is making is that there's only 2 to 5 teams that are ever above the second apron, so it doesn't affect anyone, which conveniently leaves out the fact that, yeah, these 2 to 5 teams are spending so much because they're contending. There's only 4 teams that make it to the conference finals. And wouldn't you know it, the 6 teams that were in danger this offseason of surpassing the second apron consisted of 3 of the past NBA champions. And if LeBron didn't take his first ever pay cut, you could have made it the past 4. The other 3, well, in the past 3 years, they've each made the conference finals at least once. The NBA is penalizing
Phoenix
talent,
looks
or
crazy.
should I say, too much talent on one team. For some reason, and I do highly suspect it has to do with what we've just discussed, the NBA wants the dynasty to die. If we take a look throughout NBA history and look at the dynasties, which we'll define here as a team that's won at least 2 championships in 4 years, we'll see that they're all heliocentric in nature. And wouldn't you know it, if the second apron existed, each and every single dynasty would have surpassed it, to my knowledge. Star power is what has and will continue to rule the NBA. But that's not really what they want anymore, now is it? Which I guess is all fine and dandy. I'm sure there are some cheapskate billionaires that just bought the team to brag at the golf course and don't want to risk losing some sweet revenue in order to actually be competent. And of course, voted that stars shouldn't be making super teams and letting blacks have financial freedom and all that. Hey, hold on. No, I'm keeping it a beam because look at some of these guys. They're racist. But the biggest problem, beyond anything I've just mentioned, that really grinds my gears. After the NBA's made all those big moves and huge claims about supporting small markets, is that they're hurting small markets.
This motherfucker does not
the
like
ones
small
that are
markets.
lazy and all have terrible leadership. No, I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the small market. Hell, any market actually that drafts well and makes smart decisions. OKC is the leading example of this. Shea will get the Supermax in 3 years, with Chet and J-Dub getting the max next year. They signed Hartenstein and traded for Caruso because they need to win now, despite being the youngest first seed ever and pulling off the most perfect rebuild in NBA history, because that is the name of the game now. Because in 3 to 4 years, they're cooked. Let's take a look at the Spurs. They're the perfect example for assimilation. They're currently going through their third iteration of the generational big man. The last go around, it came with 5 championships. This was possible because of 1, the Spurs' big 3 willingness to take pay cuts, 2, the length of maximum contracts being so long, about 7 years, 3, the Spurs' utterly superb and fantastic scouting department. I mean, just think about it, man. Like, Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili were drafted with the 28th and 57th picks respectively. They traded George Hill for Kawhi Leonard. In the past decade, they got Kyle Anderson with the 30th pick. They drafted DeJounte Murray and Derek White with the 29th pick in back-to-back years. Keldon Johnson, a more recent 29th pick, was a 20-point plus per game scorer pre-Wemby.
You know what I think it is too? You know what I think it is? Not that I'm thinking about it. Like I said, I think the NBA is just operating with certain goals in mind for certain periods of time. I personally think right now they're trying to floor raise. And there's been a lot of talk specifically lately about expansion. I do think what the NBA is trying to do right now is kind of supercharge those expansion teams and make the rules so that they can come into the league and be competitive in a relatively short amount of time. I think that's what's going on as well. And then possibly in the next CBA, we can revise things to allow dynasties to come back into the fold more easily. But I just think right now the NBA they're trying to figure shit out. They're trying to move in a certain direction right now. I don't necessarily think that they're going to stay in this direction forever, so.
Then he willingly accepted a bench role this season. Bro, where do you find these people, man? And of course, they've got a great core too. I mean, they've got it all. And also, their willingness and ability to swap in and out players to fit around their big 3. Then you've got Greg Popovich, R.C. Buford, and oh yeah, this is never going to happen again. Not because they had the absolute perfect storm and unselfish stars and perfect coaching and management, but because the CBA just won't allow them to. Let's say in 2025, the Spurs get lucky again and land like Cooper Flagg or something like that. Plus, their great pieces develop further and make them a finals contender type of team. For the next few years, that'll be very manageable because Wemby's on his first contract, as well as their hypothetical second young star. Let's say a few years from now, they make the conference finals and just almost make the finals. They lose to like Ant in 7 or something like that. Cool, they'll be back. But the thing is, Vic is on his max deal, and Flagg's about to sign his too. Boom, for 2 players, that's over half of the cap gone. 2 young players, I should add. If you add Devin Vassell's contract to that, then that's up to 70% of your cap space for 3 players. And mind you, this is about as efficient as you can get. The second apron is 130% of the cap. So basically, to fill in quality players around these 3 core pieces, you've got at least 60% to fill 4 spots before you're fully cooked. So that's already hard enough to do. But let's say that they pulled it off because it's the Spurs. Let's say sometime in the next 2 years after that conference finals season, they go on to win the NBA Finals. Hooray, everyone's happy. Not so fast. Vic is now up for a Supermax extension. That's 35% of the cap. Hurts, but it's doable. But remember some of the players that they picked up on low value? Well, they're NBA champions now. Price just went up. And remember Devin's super team-friendly contract. He's also an NBA champ, so no more of that. Max extension. That hurts bad. You might have been nudging right on the line of that apron. And now you've lost 5% of the cap to the Supermax and another 10% to Vassell's max. Someone's out of there. Goodbye Vassell, or goodbye. Super valuable and universally loved role player. He's going to a place that's going to treat him right. Good for him. Wish him all the best. Happy tears. So the Spurs trudge on, retool, and find some other spectacular undervalued contract against the odds and make it to another championship. Win or lose, it doesn't matter. People are starting to think that this is the time. A new dynasty is on the horizon. But Flag just got all NBA third team. Price just went up. Again, another 5% of the cap. Gone.
I also think if this is the direction the NBA is going in, I think first round draft picks are gonna be way more valuable in the future compared to what they already are. And I also think specifically, I think teams are going to be looking for more. Specifically in the mid lottery to the late first round, they are going to be looking for the most NBA ready prospects available. They're not looking for projects anymore. They're not looking for guys who, you know, they may need the draft and stash or, you know, send to the G League for 2 to 3 years. They are looking for guys that can contribute right away on some Jaime Jaquez shit. On some Dalton Kennett shit. The guys who can contribute right away and be productive for playoff teams right away, who are going to be on good contracts, team-friendly contracts, I think those guys are going to be the most important pieces to championship teams in the future. The guys who are vets that are trying to win, like what bro said in the video, those guys are going to be cooked. Those guys are going to be cooked. They're going to be going to like small market teams or mid-level teams, not even small market teams, but just like lower tier teams that'll give them the money if their prerogative is also getting the money, because they're gonna have to choose. Do you want the money and be on a shitty team, or do you want to essentially have the minimum, you know what I'm saying, and pay for a contender? I think low-key that's what happened with Gary Trent over this last week. I don't think Gary Trent is so bad that he should be going for a league minimum, but if he wants to contend, that's what's going to have to happen.
And that undervalued contract that was the rock of the team for the whole season, yeah, he's probably cooked too. And this just keeps on happening. Unless you've got Danny Ainge and Brad Stevens in your front office, there's just no way to keep a raw finals contender year in and year out. Well, I mean, it's the Spurs. They probably could. I mean, they've already done it. But still, you get what I'm saying. The rotation's always got to be cycling. Brad Stevens even said it himself.
One of my main objectives is not have this be anything but sustainable. Like, keep finding a way to be sustainable. Keep finding a way to sustainably put yourself in the mix for years and years and years. That's what we would like. It's hard to do.
And mind you, this is all happening after the team's already drafted 2, not 1, 2 stars, which really isn't fair to smaller markets in the NBA. Even though I did trash on the concept a little bit before, having that big star, and more importantly that big dynasty, really does elevate a team and market status. I mean, Chicago's literally feeling the effects of the Jordan era to this day, 30 years later. Teams should have the reward of drafting the player, developing him, and being able to build a solid, continuous, that's the key word here, roster around him without an obscene penalty. Their reward should be a highly competitive roster, year in and year out. But if your KCPs and Derrick Jones Jr.'s are leaving each year you make a run, well, that's not sustainable forever. Brad found his sustained roster and he's cashing in, and only after they won the chip. And now look, the owners are literally running from the consequences. The only people willing to deal with the Celtics situation left are probably the Saudis and Jeff Bezos, man. That's it. And the worst thing about it too is money can't solve everything. If one of
that's the weird situation though, in terms of like the NBA wanting a dynasty to end, is low key because everyone is scary now. The one franchise that ain't scary, I feel like they have not necessarily an unfair advantage because everyone's playing by the same rules, but they have something that the rest of the league doesn't have. You know what I'm saying? So does the second apron technically work in the Celtics trying to build a dynasty in hindsight? We'll see. We'll see, because obviously, you know, injuries played a factor in last season's run. And also, you know, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown still low-key have questions to answer in terms of sustained playoff success outside of just one run to win it all, obviously, because they've sustained playoff success before this. But y'all know what I mean. Those are the questions to be had. Definitely interesting, though.
If your players get hurt or decline or anything like that, you're cooked. There's no hope for getting better. If you're doing well, you'll be at the bottom of the draft, but there's no tricks to move up unless you give up your players for less value and then become less likely to be a champion. That's the flattening I was talking about. And oh yeah, by the way, the price of keeping the team together. You thought $200 million was bad? Try $500 million in 1 year. Do you guys think the San Antonio Spurs, or any other team for that matter, would be able to win 2 championships, let alone 5, in such conditions? Yeah, probably not. And that's just the way the NBA wants it. But I fundamentally believe that this is a mistake. The NBA has thrived on the dynasty. So has the NFL. The only reason I know about the Yankees was because they were a dynasty at some point, I think. If we're banking on the popularity of the league and making it harder for the casual fan to invest since there's already enough interest, So be it. It's a reasonable assumption, and to be honest, a smart gamble. But if they're expecting legends to be born in this age of parity that they've created, that this is going to go exactly as they've anticipated, they might have to rethink their strategy. Thanks for watching. Oh, by the way, I need y'all to follow me on Twitter. I've been trying to get some interviews through Twitter DMs. It's not working because I don't have any motion, man. I don't even have 100 followers.
Hey, man, follow my guy, Kip Kame. Is it Kip Kame? Kip Kame? In terms of this conversation, and if I want Dynasties to come back, selfishly, yes. Yes, bro. But in terms of growing the league, if the prerogative is floor raising, essentially, I think there's so much talent in the league now that the floor level of talent and competition in the league is just going to naturally be that, in my opinion. You essentially saying we're going to be stagnant in terms of growing the league for the next couple of years. I don't know if I like that. I don't necessarily know if I like that. Maybe not stagnant. Stagnant is probably the wrong word, but not utilizing your resources to maximize growth is kind of just from the outside looking in. But also, when you are the NBA and you are as profitable as the NBA, there are going to be ebbs and flows of the business where your prerogative, again, is not growth. It's about sustainability. It's about raising your floor in terms of competition, in terms of revenue, in terms of all these different things. But if the question is, what do we need to do to grow the league? Getting rid of dynasties is a mistake. More parity is a mistake. If you look historically in the NBA, the times where ratings have been shoddy, the times where ratings have really been a big problem for the league is in times of parity. These marketing conversations only exist when there is no megastar in the league, when there is no clear-cut face of the league. You know what I'm saying? And I think right now is one of those times, especially with LeBron on his last 2 to 3 years of his career, with Curry getting up there in age and KD being who KD is, which you can argue he was never really that guy again, like I outlined in this video. I think it is a mistake to essentially not allow or set up the rules in a way to not allow Victor Wembanyama, Luka Doncic, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Nikola Jokic to develop these top 10 GOAT-ish resumes. You know what I'm saying? Because I would actually like to argue that over these last 5 years, because this is a recent change that the CBA made, like Jokic, Giannis, low-key Luka, they have been in a trajectory where they could possibly compete for one of those top 10 all-time spots. Low-key. But for them to handicap essentially their resumes in terms of the casual perceiving their careers, obviously, you know, the hardcore fans will dive into the analytics and, you know things about winning bias and really dive into shit more objectively speaking and more in a more advanced manner. But in terms of marketing people and trying to make the biggest event that you can, trying to appeal to the casual viewer, trying to draw people in who do not even know what the NBA is, yeah, I do believe what they're doing is not necessarily good for the league in terms of growing. But what the fuck do I know, man? There's a lot of smart people in the NBA, and I'm just a fan of the game. So, with that being said, links to Kip Kame's video will be in the description once again. With that being said, I'm out of here, man. Peace.